Hey, everybody, welcome back to Fly on the Wall podcast. Today, I am with indie songwriter, performer, composer, Isaac Page. I'm very happy to have you here today, and it's late where you're at. It's almost 9 o'clock at night.
Almost 9 o'clock. Yeah, yeah.
I
Well, thank you for having me, Justin.
After a long day of work, you still chose to come and hang out with me, so I appreciate that. So before we get started, I'm going to play a little ad for a friend of mine who makes some amazing apparel. So here we go. We're proud to have this podcast sponsored by Donut Punk Apparel. If you, like me, are into fun, colorful 90s nostalgic apparel, then you've got to check out Donut Punk at donutpunk.com. I love the shirts. I saw the brand on TikTok and it's just blowing up there. It seems like everybody there is wearing them. So I ordered one and now I'm part of the cool kids and you can be too. There's a new Jurassic Park inspired shirt that just dropped about a week and a half ago. And you've got to check that one out. It's really cool looking, a little bit of a tie-dye effect. And yeah, it's my favorite design so far. So I have to get that shirt too. Donut Punk is nostalgically baked apparel that you can find now at donutpunk.com. One more time, that's donutpunk.com. That's right, donutpunk.com. Honestly, some of the most comfortable shirts I've ever worn. They're not like scratchy cotton. He really uses a premium t-shirt, so they're super comfortable, and I like to wear them, like on the podcast and stuff, and just relax. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is Isaac Page. I came across you on TikTok also. So the cool thing about social media now is that there's a lot of talent out there that's now being discovered and people are getting employment, and TikTok's fantastic because I didn't, no offense, I didn't know who you were. I've never heard your music, and it doesn't come up on like my recommendations on Spotify or Tidal or anything like that. How did you get started with your music?
But recently I've been doing this stuff as Isaac Hunter, which is my, as my dad likes to say, nom de streaming. Whereas it's my middle name, Hunter. And I decided at the beginning of the pandemic to start doing this. It was just I just graduated with a master's in conducting. So I decided, I have no orchestra to conduct right now. I have no one playing my classical music. That's not happening. So, but I realized very quickly there is no way I can be happy or exist in my own body without playing music of some kind, without making music in some way. So I just picked up my guitar again after a couple of years of just like the only time I've been playing my guitar for the last 6 years was when I would get drunk and try to serenade whatever person I was seeing at the time, or like, go at a party and play like Wonderwall. Because that was
I think that's the party go to if you own a guitar.
Yeah, you got to be that asshole.
To play Stairway to Heaven. Or you have to play Wonderwall.
Yeah, and if you had enough drinks to think that you can play a guitar in front of a party of people, you're not playing Stairway to Heaven. You're going to go with what's easy and people can sing along to.
And as loudly as possible, and it doesn't have to sound great.
No, exactly.
It's just a good time.
And that's honestly like the best thing I love about music. Like I have studied very refined music. I've written a lot of like serialist atonal 12-tone stuff, and I love that kind of stuff, but like at the end of the day, there's a feeling you get of being part of a community and hearing people singing along together and partake in a communal musical experience. That's what I love about conducting, is like if you conduct Beethoven 9 or a Mozart overture or something, and that orchestra is tight, you can feel the energy from each person to another and the audience and all that. I love being literally conductor for that energy. But at the beginning of the pandemic, all of that went away. So I went back to what I did in high school before I went into classical music more seriously, which was songwriting. I hadn't really written much music on guitar or even lyrics of my own really since I graduated high school about 6-7 years ago now. Um, and even then, I think I kind of gave it up a little bit, like halfway through high school. Um, and so I was living in Ohio at the time, finished my master's, and then I was on my way back to Toronto, where I currently am, and the Canadian borders closed, and I didn't know what the border crossing process was going to be, so I went to my dad's house, and as we were talking about, my dad, Stephen Page,
And
great
yeah,
music.
for those that don't know, and I'm apparently I'm a little slow at this. So I've been talking to Isaac for a few days now, about a week, and I was listening to his music, and just before we started, I was like, there's a real familiar feel about your music, and you look familiar, and then it finally clicked. So it was probably about 10 years ago now. I had met your dad locally here in Salt Lake City. We were doing an ugly sweater contest. Um, and your dad played an entire set, and he was a very good sport, and he did a meet and greet and everything, and spoke to him. He was really, really nice. And then it only clicked today that you may be related to this person. And then you're like, no, 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 that's my dad. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
so he's
I kind of see where, the guitar playing and the songwriting and the singing and the music side of you comes from.
well,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
and my mom as well is a musician, so I grew up in a super musical family. My mom is a music teacher and a flute player, and did her master's in music history. So like I grew up with that kind of combination, classical and pop music, uh,
Wow.
which is both things that have driven me throughout my love of music. And I decided to shift back to pop music a little bit. Initially it was orchestras will start up in September. Everything will be fine. It's got 4 weeks to just flatten the curve, and we're all gonna go back to normal.
We're all going to
Um,
be relaxed and everything's going to be great.
yeah, masks. I know. Just wash your hands. You're gonna be fine.
Yeah, you'll be
Uh,
great. It'll be
uh,
fantastic.
Try to keep 6 feet away from people if you can. Um, just don't touch too many things at the grocery store. You'll be okay. Um, and so I didn't really think too much about being Isaac Hunter, being a songwriter, all that. It was just kind of like this fun diversion for me, which was great because songwriting is something I've always loved. Um, but because as you said, there's a great example of a great songwriter in my family. My dad is one of my favorite songwriters, an incredible musician.
Well, at this point, I grew up listening to Bare Naked Ladies, and sort of watch your dad perform live these songs that I listened to um when I was going through high school in the late 90s. It was awesome. So to for you to have that as kind of like in your back pocket, and you've got that resource to speak to, that must have been amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you look at him like dad, but everybody else looks at him like fantastic, writer and just brilliant.
Well, and I do also look at him that way. Like that's the weird the strange aspect of our relationship, especially as I've gotten older, because there was the point, you know, uh, right after I left Toronto for my dad, my parents are divorced. My dad wasn't like um my mom was kind of my primary caregiver. My dad was come and go with work and all that. So, he's always dad, but he's also like, we don't have a constant way of being in touch. Like, well, we
Right.
text, we talk, but like
I get that.
it's always been intermittent exposure to each other.
Right.
Which is not to diminish our relationship. Like, it's a very strong one, but there's always that like element of separation. But finally, when I left home for the first time, his music has always been nostalgic comfort, like a blanket for me almost. And I remember there was like one night I was just not feeling great, and I was walking home from like a party and decided to start listening to some of his music, and to kind of like just make myself feel a little bit better. And suddenly the lyrics started to register what they meant. Like I was listening to Jane, I was listening to War on Drugs, Call and Answer, and just suddenly like understanding what those songs are about on not like a like suddenly my dad stopped being like that voice that I was listening to stopped being my dad's voice and started being like, oh, this artist gets me.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when did this happen?
Like sometimes it takes me a little while to do that. Like if I listen to music, I'm very much I can remember the melody,
Yeah.
or like a bass line or something like that. As far as lyrics, like they get muddled. But there's certain bands I listen to, like Strumbellas, and there's a few others that I listen to, and then I re-listen to, and I listen to the words that they're saying finally, and it's like,
yeah.
dang.
Well, and the Strumbellas are masters of juxtaposition that way.
Oh, they're so good because I think they're from like,
they're from Toronto.
I know they're from Canada, but
yeah.
I don't know if they're from Toronto or
they are.
But I've got them coming up too. So it'll be fantastic to talk to them. But
awesome.
But yeah, it's something to connect with a writer or somebody that's singing, and you understand it. It's no longer like a pop song. Where you and your friends are sitting there having a beer and relaxing and just listening to music. Now you're involved with it. And I think that's kind of the evolution is when you actually get involved, with the lyrics and what's being said.
Yeah.
I was listening to Your Lullaby for Adults.
Oh,
that don't feel like what I can't
feel like real adults.
That feel like real adults, and that clicks with me too. So you're quite a storyteller. So you're getting your message across really, really well. And that's why I've listened to everything, so it's great. I'm enjoying it so far.
Thank you so much. And that's so stepping back a couple of steps, like what I was saying earlier with, I just got back into it for fun, just not thinking about it too hard because, and by just not thinking that I was going to have to invest any effort in this, I could just do what I wanted and be silly, say things that maybe like, if I'd actually like let my insecurities grab a hold of, I wouldn't be saying. And those are like the first 3 songs I wrote. The first song I wrote, getting back into it, was Waiting for the Summer Days.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote Wiser, and then I wrote Going to KW. And Going to KW that was one of my first songs that kind of took off on TikTok as well. Like it garnered a little bit of attention, especially in Ontario. And that was interesting to me because I wrote that song just thinking about, the house I lived in when I was at university, the bar I went to, hanging out at friends' houses, drinking until the sun rose and the birds were chirping. And just like sitting in traffic, like traveling between my mom's house in Toronto.
Hold on, pause and back up. Like at the beginning of that, you fuzzed. Dang it, you were on a roll. Gotta love the internet.
I was on a roll. Yeah, it's I know, and there's a wonderful thing in Canada where we have a monopoly of 3 internet providers, and they like we know that they fix their rates. Like we know that they just decide to interrupt serve. It's ridiculous. My roommates and I are paying way too much for this internet, this quality. Anyways, so I wrote, I wasn't trying to think of, whether I should say things or not. When I started doing this, like I didn't really invest anything in it because I thought I was just going to go back to conducting. And then I started to realize like I really loved it. I missed it. And like the reasons that I put it away back in high school were dumb. It was just like some people had said bad, like some people had said like they didn't like my lyrics, and I said I'm not going to write any again. I'm just going to focus. Did
you ever write or perform in high school or anything like that? You did?
Yeah, I was part of a band. We played a lot. We did a lot of we did some DIY shows, and it was strange because we were like this, alt rock wannabes, all like weird outcast kids. Like there was me who looked like basically the same personality. We had a singer who was a very he wanted to be taken so seriously, and he would like, he would try to get the most obscure knowledge across in his lyrics. Like he was a really good lyricist, but he was just a piece of work in rehearsals. We had two metalheads on drums and bass, and then we had like an incredible keyboard player and singer. She was fantastic. Um, and we did like battle of the bands. We did DIY shows. We were like this weird group of people, and I have one memory of us playing this like DIY house show in Toronto for like this venue that's gone now because it got torn down to make a condo. But it's the kind of thing like I remember like
important.
yeah. I remember telling people like, oh yeah, I played at this place, and they went, what? Why would you play there? But like we did a lot of stuff. I performed a lot, and then the band broke up, and then I focused on classical music. And I stopped writing songs because like everyone, like in my mind, I'm like, people have told me my lyrics are like, need X number of things worked on, and I don't want to work on those stuff. Which is not a reason to give anything up. But I was like, I have other things to focus on. And then also like, I don't want the compare.
Hold on.
Ah,
Okay, now pick up.
there.
You don't want to be compared to.
I don't want to be compared to my dad. I don't want to be compared to my brother, who's also a really wonderful composer and songwriter and lyricist.
It's
and
literally everybody in your family.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm just gonna be another one. I'll do the thing that makes me special, which is classical music. And then I realized, like, after I'd written a couple songs, I had a lot of fun. Like, I went to my dad's house for a couple weeks. I was living with him for a bit. We recorded my first EP there, and I realized I had so much fun doing that. I would be dumb to just put that aside again.
Absolutely. I think that's a great message. As essentially you a lot of people drop and they lose. It's not necessarily you lose interest, but your life takes you in a different direction.
Yeah.
So for you, it was to go to university, and it was to get a degree and to do, something different that was just something other than music playing and writing, and you kind of stepped away from it. But it sounds to me that COVID was kind of that catalyst to get you going again, which is great because you're great at it. You're good at it,
Yeah.
And the fact that I understand, being like in the shadow of, like your family. But the biggest thing that you should just know, and I think you figured it out, was to have fun with it, and to learn to be, unedited and just get out what's in your head and enjoy it. It's not your dad's music. It's not your brother's music. It's not your mom's, it's yours. And you're doing a really good job at it.
Thank you.
Misguided Scorpio, which is your 2020 album, is really good.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I'm really enjoying it. I'm really glad you found, music in your guitar and your voice, and you're using them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like music has always been a thing for me. Like Misguided Scorpio, for example. Like I play all the instruments on that. Same thing with my first EP.
Okay, I can barely play my guitar, and you're like, I played them all.
Yeah, it's what I do. And so on Broadview and on her favorite music, there's string parts, and that's viola, which I've been playing for the last 8 years. And so I try my best to try like bring in the bits of the classical music realm into what I do. With some some songs are more successful. Some songs just don't need it. Some songs should just be 4 chords and belting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Guys, Scorpio, my first EP, 4 songs, I recorded at my dad's house, and he's got a lot. He's made massive investments in his recording setup. Like he records most of his solo stuff in there, at his house, and so it sounds like a pretty professional recording, at least to my ears. Whereas Misguided Scorpio sounds a lot more stripped down, a little bit more amateur, because I
You know
recorded
what it
it
kind of
right
reminded
here.
me of? It reminded me of um Mike Posner
Mm,
would record all of his music when he was at Duke, and he did it all himself. And I believe John Vesley for Secondhand Serenade did the same thing. And those albums that they put out, they have a specific sound.
yeah.
It reminds me of like, and this, I don't mean this in derogatory. It doesn't sound like as polished or over processed. It sounds just like you're like, you know what, I'm going to record this, and we'll see how this goes, and then put that track down, and you're like, done,
Yeah.
done. And sometimes that's all it needs. I think sometimes music is just so overdone, it loses that initial rawness, which is
Yeah.
where I think you can actually process out like emotion. You can process out, a feeling a song has, because it's been overdone.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a different experience to just kind of go to, and that was kind of the point of me writing that, recording that EP, was I was so frustrated and stagnant. I had felt like nothing had happened in my life for 4 months at that point. Like, I had a couple of things happen to me at the beginning of the pandemic. And then once I moved back to Toronto, everything stopped. And I'd moved to a new,
Pause.
but I
Hold
felt
on.
like my professional
back
life
up.
was,
Back up 3 seconds.
I'm so
Every
I'm
time
so
you get
sorry.
on a roll,
I'm
it's
so,
just like pause. Hold on. All right, we're buffered.
it's the Canadian internet saying, no, Canadians can't show this level of enthusiasm. You gotta be more humble. You can't talk about yourself so
And
much.
you're supposed to apologize every time that happens, right? Sorry.
Sorry. Well, getting back to that, I had felt so stagnant for a while. I remember, it was, what was it, 2 weeks, 2 weeks before my birthday, which is, middle of November, Scorpio, and I just said, fuck it. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear.
No, you're good.
But fuck it. I'm going to record an EP in my room. I'm going to write and record a new song every week. And I didn't quite get there. I was a little bit loose with that, but I still ended up writing and recording 6 songs. I'd already recorded Broadview, so I wrote and recorded 5 songs. And in the course of 5 weeks. And that, some of those recordings really show that. Some of those recordings really are rough. Could have used a second pass. Could have used a little bit more time. Maybe the lyrics could have been rewritten, or the song could have been just maybe it didn't need to be recorded.
I kind of look at it like I don't write songs. I don't have. I probably have the skill. I don't think I have the patience for it.
Yeah.
I started this podcast and it's raw, period. It's raw. This is a brand new format to me. God dang it. Your face is frozen. Okay. You're back.
I'm back. Sorry.
And so what I was saying is that this is like a new format to me. And, I've had some people like, well, you can edit out all the bad parts and you can edit this out. And I'm like, you're right. I can. I'm not going to, because I look at everything as a learning experience.
Yeah.
So for me, I want to go back and look at, my episode 1, and critique myself and just see where I've come as opposed to like episode 5,
Yeah.
So I think it feels like to me, you kind of took the same approach. Like you were just kind of like, I'm going to get it out. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it worked overall. I think it did. I think some of those songs, especially the first 2 songs on the EP, they could use a second pass, but I still like those songs. And I once I kind of get over the I should have recorded that differently, or I wish I didn't use that, like, oh, I wish I like re-recorded the vocal on that, or I should have gone for a different like way of playing that thing. Once I get over that, I'm like, no, I like those songs, and I like what they meant for where I was.
Well, I
I
mean,
think,
if you look at and listen to old, so I grew up in Seattle in the 90s.
mm,
So it was, bands like Grun Truck and, Pearl Jam and
yeah,
Nirvana and Soundgarden. And all of these bands had their own cassettes that they would put out that they would literally just record in a garage, a little tape
yeah,
recorder in the
yeah,
middle, and they would scream their lives out into it. And I think those are some of the best. It's like going like the Grateful Dead. There's always a bootleg copy, and sometimes those are better than the studio recorded albums. They're fantastic, and you get something different from it.
yeah, absolutely. And like I think of one of my favorite songwriters is John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats, and the first 10 albums that he put out were either just done onto his boombox in one take, as he did again recently with some of his stuff, and or like very sparse production on like all on a budget. And some songs are amazing and are, I think, benefit from that kind of uh, hurried production. Other songs aren't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've got winners, and you've got ones that aren't so good.
Yeah, and you could be as great a songwriter as John Darnielle and still have a couple duds, and it's okay. It's okay to not have every song be.
Perfection is not everything.
No, it's completely overrated, and that's also something I kind of picked up I learned the hard way at university, and also just learned from like seeing friends. Being in a composition program in my bachelor's, you meet so many people that just like can't pick the next note because the next note needs to be perfect. It's like, okay, you have all these rules already set up. You have these options. Pick one that's going to get to the next one. If you don't like what you did, either do it again or just finish, like decide to abandon that piece of art and start again, do something new. You can fix it on the next one.
I think the issue is that even for just a lot of songwriters and indie artists is that they don't want to fail,
Yeah.
and they feel, okay, so my first album, it has to be like this masterpiece and polished. And like when I look at like a new artist, because typically when I go shoot a concert, it's a bunch of new artists, because I think we're a secondary market here.
Mm.
So I'll shoot for the radio stations, and all these new bands are coming through, so and I like the non-polished version. I love that because it makes them human, and it makes like what they do seem like, for somebody that's going to attempt writing music or attempt playing music, it seems more attainable. Like, oh, they didn't sing that perfect, and that was off key, or whatever the case may be, or they played a note wrong. It makes it more attainable to the person that's listening.
Yeah.
So it feeds into their their success, really, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
absolutely. And those moments of also like that fragile nature of performance is so amazing. Like where something could go wrong, the voice could break, they could land on the wrong chord for just a second, and that tension is really something that pulls you in, and you can see how people handle themselves with that.
Oh, I've seen
It's
I've
yeah,
seen people just miss saying one lyric, and it's just like, stop.
yeah,
Like, oh no, he's doing it. Okay, and they're starting over. All right. And then, there's always the musicians that have been out forever. They've been singing forever, and they don't miss a beat. They remember
yeah,
every lyric, and they remember every chord, and it's a perfect performance. But
yeah.
uh,
Well, no, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, you're good. I was
Uh,
turning off my fan.
oh, okay. I was you know what, one other great thing about growing up with my dad is seeing the like, seeing the flubs in performance. Like I've seen him forget the words to his songs that he's sung 1,000 times. 1,000 being a generous like
That's an underestimation.
It's
Wow.
a severe underestimation. Hundreds of thousands of times. Um, I have seen him forget the words, and you can tell how professional and practiced a performer is based on how they handle themselves when when that happens. It and it happens to me too. Like I've been performing more recently. Like recently, I've been doing Twitch concerts with my roommate, occasional writing partner, and best friend, Evan Sokolowski, and I'll forget the words sometimes. We even have we'll have the lyric sheets in front of us, and I just like I'll get lost in performance and totally lose my spot, and just like either I make up lyrics to go along with what's happening so we can just get through the song, or I just go cycle the chords until I figure out what the word was. Or I'll just say sometimes I'll just like acknowledge it. Like I'll try to do something. Like last week we were doing my song National Treasure, and I like started. I thought like halfway through the song I thought it'd be funny if I like shouted out what the Nick Cage movies I referenced were, and the first one I did, I shouted out the wrong movie, and immediately my brain registered it, but I had to sing the next line, so I just like I just kind of went, okay, moving on. Like we just kept going with the song.
I've done stuff like that. So they're okay. So I'm part of a fraternity. I'm a Freemason. And a big part of it is that there's a lot of ritual and there's a lot of essentially they're plays. And so my problem is memorization. And then my problem is memorizing it and then speaking. So I will have to just ad lib something and they just kind of look at me like, what? I'm like, no, really, right? That's close. That's good enough. No, I get that. Like I could never be an actor, like ever. I've got friends that are actors and I'm like, I don't understand how you do what you do. And they're like, oh, well, I use a technique. I'm like, okay, I'll try that technique and it doesn't work. And then I've got other friends that are just like, yeah, I could just look at a page and I just remember everything. I'm like, you suck because I can't do that. I would like to do that, but it's not ever going to happen. So the fact, it all just boils down to how you're going to handle yourself inevitably when that happens, because real people that are not like memorization masters, they're going to mess up. So it's all in how you handle it. If you have fun with it, I think that's all it boils down to. Is just having fun. And a lot of people don't have fun. You have to have fun with your craft. You got to be goofy. You've got to screw up. That's all part of it. And that's a lot of people get into things and are like, it just has to be perfect. And I disagree 100%.
No, I disagree with it too. Like I have a lot of artists I really respect are perfectionists, and I am a perfectionist to some degree. But a while ago, I learned to just. I think the best piece of advice I got was like, art is never finished; it's abandoned. It's been said many times, but like, why had a teacher tell me that once? And you just kind of learn to understand when what you're working on is done enough. Like, yeah, you could keep tweaking this, and in the case of like recording, or writing a song, yeah, maybe that's not the best word choice. You could find a better word. Or if I was recording, like, yeah, well, maybe the EQ on this, like maybe I could, boost the 5K region of this, or like the 8K on this instrument here, and then maybe subtract this, cut away some of the bass frequencies. But I could just do that for hours, days, and really at the end of the day, the improvement is minuscule.
You get involved too much in the details at that point.
Yeah.
And then at some point you overwork it and you can't undo it.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and you end up at the beginning anyway.
Yeah. Another teacher of mine once told me, like, using another example of a composer working on a large orchestral piece and just like, can't find the right note for the third clarinet. At that point, you're looking at the notes, not the score.
Right.
Like, if that's the wrong note, no one's going to know because everything else seems to be right.
It all flows together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly.
it turns into, it's almost like a micromanagement kind of issue.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
get
It's
too
all,
far into it.
yeah, you've lost sight of the whole.
Yeah,
You're, you're,
absolutely. No,
yeah.
I totally agree with that. So you're a conductor, which means that you're the guy that stands in the pit.
Yep. Yeah. I'm the guy with the stick.
Okay, so I've never understood that. I've been to a few performances. Um, I don't understand what you are doing. And I think there's probably a few people out there that don't understand what you're doing. Can you explain that?
I'm gonna use a visual aid. I know it's an audio, like I know it's an audio format, but I'm gonna use a visual aid.
I've got video going up after,
oh, you are?
after this too. It's on YouTube.
Oh, perfect. All
Yes.
right, I'm gonna use the visual aid then. I've got my baton just off camera. Just give me 1 second.
Awesome, fantastic. Look at all this information. See, you can get so much information from people you've never met. Okay. Fantastic.
All right. So, got one of my batons here. And the main things that you're doing as a conductor, maintaining tempo, and so the speed of the music. Cueing is a big thing, especially if you're working with like younger groups, just like knowing where the music starts and stops, and the shaping of it. So like, as we were just talking about, like, understanding the whole of the piece and not just the details. The conductor needs to know the details, and some conductors that I've worked with are sticklers for the details. Like I've worked with some people that will, like, take away your score as you're conducting and ask you, all right, so whose entrance did you just miss? Or, what note is the second trombone playing? And usually you're supposed to know, but there's a whole, like, just elitist power structure to that, of just like the humiliation involved. It's a toxic environment sometimes. There are great conductors that I've worked with, but like, that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
The other things that you're doing, communicating to the group. So being able to, like, talk about mood, understand the phrase structures of pieces, work on dynamics, work on like getting a musical character out of it, because there's so many different ways that music can be played. And it's, you could hand 5 different players the same 4 bars and they'll play it 10 different ways between them. And the conductor's job is basically to determine which one is the best for the context. Once you're in performance, 95% of the job has been finished. Rehearsal is where almost all of the stuff happens. And if you have a good, with most groups, you're going to take notes, you're going to, there's going to be practice outside of rehearsals. So all the notes are going to be taken care of, all the music itself on a surface level, taken care of without a conductor. The conductor's in charge of, like, as I said, starts and stops, and the overall picture of things. Also, if things go wrong, being able to then know where to pick things back up. So that's the other thing.
As a conductor, do you memorize all the music? Like is it all in your head, or are you just following along with sheet? Or
you've got your score, which has all the parts in it, and you want to know it well enough that you don't have to look down, but having it there is helpful. There are conductors that take pride in memorizing all their music, and in a performance that's great, good for you. It doesn't really add anything. If you're too much in the score, it can take away from the performance because the musicians see that you're not paying attention to them. You're maybe listening to them, but you're clearly like looking down at the score in front of
So you
you.
really have to be
And
engaged with the people playing the
yeah,
instruments.
yeah, you need to do whatever you can to get the best sound out of them and the sound that you want. Or the sound, the better way to say it, the sound that you think is best for the piece.
Right.
Um, so like, if let's say for example the cellos have this melody and they kind of come out of nowhere, but they've got this great register. If when they come in, bring them in together as a group, look at the cellos, maintain some eye contact with them, and once they're set, you can move away somewhere else and deal with like maybe I'm just imagining something in my head, but like maybe like a little trumpet fanfare that happens somewhere, or sometimes being able to adjust on the fly, like if a section is really aggressive and then suddenly it has to transition to something ethereal, being able to show that in your body so that everyone knows exactly how to make that sound
So
through
you're
kind of a
really
physical medium.
doing a performance. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming all the hand movements mean something, but I remember seeing, like different body movements and, that,
Yes.
there's lots of hand gestures and,
Yes.
their bodies will slump in certain ways or they will perk up in others, so it's,
Yeah.
I couldn't
And
do that. I'd be confused.
no, it's there. I think there's this like in conducting, it's such a physical thing, and also like I've seen many conductors do it, but is this thing on? Like this doesn't make any noise. This doesn't make any sound whatsoever unless I really fast. You can hear a little bit,
A little like
a little wind noise. But there's no like one way to conduct, and there are many different ways to teach it, many different ways to learn it, and many different ways to practice it. One of my and I've had very humbling moments before where there's the way I was taught to do something, or the textbook way that something should be done to communicate to the orchestra that you want XYZ done. Sorry, XYZ.
Zed's fine.
And then I'll do that thing and it doesn't work. And I do just the thing that I don't even think about it for a second. On paper, it's wrong. It's confusing. It's gonna, throw everybody off, and no one's ever gonna want to play under you again. And that's the thing that works. And that just happens sometimes.
So it's a matter of it's like it's communicating, and if you can communicate effectively what you're trying to say to them, then do that.
Yep, and everyone has their own way of doing it. Gestures are a big thing, like as you were saying, the hand movements. The baton really I've seen a lot of conductors conduct without it. The baton is a gesture amplifier. I can do, just grasping in my hand right now. I'm not sure how clearly you can see this.
Oh, I can see it clear. Perfect.
Yeah. I got a little 4 pattern going here, and that's nothing. If I take away my baton, you can't really see what I'm doing with my hand.
Right.
That's the same motion. And so imagine if you're, a trombone player sitting 50 feet away from me, you can see this, especially if I'm wearing a solid color like I am right now, or a, tuxedo or something where it's against a dark background. You can see that pretty clearly. If I'm doing something like this, there's a whole other meaning to that. If you're conducting at that size, usually it indicates something to do with the dynamic of it, like how loud the music is. Because otherwise there's too much motion. It gets distracting.
That's fascinating.
Some conductors would disagree with me too.
I try to learn so much, right? And for the longest time, but I just never knew anybody that does what you do. So to get the answers, it's interesting because you look at, honestly, you kind of grow up watching Looney Tunes. right? You watch
Yeah.
cartoons, and the conductor's out there, and he's just making the singer just hold and hold and hold and hold, and that's what I thought it was. That's it. I'm totally cartoon based in my head. Um, but to find out that it's you trying to communicate what you want done, and you actually, it's got to be different to connect with so many people like at the same
Yes.
time. It's like back in the day you used to have multiple lines on a phone, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately they all kind of funneled into one, so now you're just trying to tell all these people what to do, and that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I miss it a lot because there's this moment that happens in rehearsals and in concert too, where you know this passage that you've all struggled with sounds better than you could have imagined, or everything just clicks, and you don't have to look down at the score anymore because you know what you're doing. The orchestra trusts you, and you just have each other there. Um, I was, my master's was fantastic, and I was really upset with how it ended because it ended in beginning of 2020. Um, so a lot of my last couple concerts got canceled, which was a shame because I had a lot of stuff I was looking forward to. But I got to have some really great experiences before that. One of which was conducting Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore, which is not like, if to most classical aficionados, it's not a grand piece of opera. It's not something that's looked on as high art. Gilbert and Sullivan's often like the comic opera, light opera. Oh, that's that British thing that old people like. Um, but I grew up with it. My mom has been playing in a Gilbert and Sullivan society every single year since I was born, I think, and I've been to like everyone I could go to from the ages of uh 4 till 24. Um, so getting the opportunity to do HS Pinafore was something I begged my teacher to do, and she let me. Uh, and I conducted 2 shows, did the rehearsals, all the whole thing. And by the first show, my score wasn't memorized, but I knew it well enough that like I I would be conducting and I get to a part where I realized I need to look ahead and know what's next. And I'd look down and I'm 20 pages behind where am in the music because I haven't needed to turn my score the entire
Hello.
time. Yeah. And it's that's a great feeling, like knowing that you're so connected with what's going on around you, the music on stage, the music in the pit, uh and you know what's going on, that you don't need to have your head down and making sure that you're in the right section. You're already thinking 20 minutes, like 2 bars ahead, the next number 20 minutes ahead, whatever.
That's
that
amazing.
that
I
level of
that's
knowledge.
that's a level of like I don't think I think I have an attention problem because I don't think I would have the attention for it. Like I can appreciate like what musicians and conductors and people and what they do. I love the end product, and I love learning the process of how it's done. All the
Mhm.
little tiny working parts, and knowing how things go together, and getting that information. But as far as me, I could not do it. So look at what you do as a singer, songwriter, composer, and it's fantastic. It blows my mind, um, because maybe it's an envy thing. Maybe that's what. Maybe it's a touch of envy that I don't have a grasp for it. Like I would love to play the guitar better, um but I don't have the grasp to learn like the technical aspect of it. And part of my problem being a Capricorn is I overanalyze everything. So I'm that guy that will overprocess everything. I'm the guy that will listen to the music and go, that little bit right there, that just wasn't right.
Mm,
I'm that person.
yeah, I know that. I know that feeling well. But though for myself, it's a lot more self-critical. Uh,
Well, you're your biggest critic. Like
yes.
I can only imagine becoming like an artist that finally landed a record deal, and they're like, okay, well, we need X amount of albums out in this amount of time. And I don't think I could do anything like that. So the people that do that, it I don't get it. I don't
Yeah.
know how they do it. And then because I would overanalyze everything, I'd be super critical of myself. And I would probably never leave the house, which isn't much different from what we're doing now.
Yeah.
But
It's good to have the critical voice in your head, because have you ever, I'm sure you've met enough people in your life that just seem like they have not had a critical thought in their life, and I can't stand them. Like, I do not want to be that person. I do not envy the person that has never thought, maybe I'm not good at this, because they're
yeah,
usually not, and
yes.
they clearly have never thought that,
Like there's
because they're not trying to
okay,
get better.
you can always flash back to TikTok.
Yeah.
And there's always that one person, hashtag songwriter, singer, and you listen to them and you're like, hmm, maybe you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Oh, and
Maybe you're more of a music writer, but
yeah.
maybe vocals isn't your thing.
Oh, and I'm sure people have thought the same thing about me. Like, but it's yeah, there's just this level of like, there's a difference between putting yourself out there and failing, and just like thinking you can never fail. And
Absolutely.
I can't stand
Absolutely.
the
So
latter.
here's something I want to know. How do you get used to the sound of your voice? So my last name's Claypool. I have a cousin with the particular last name of Claypool. If you've listened to Primus,
Yeah, I was gonna say Les Claypool.
it's Les. And like, so he found his voice. Clearly it's unique.
Yeah.
Um your dad, also a very unique voice. You with a
Yeah.
very unique voice. And I guess what I wonder is, how do you get used to hearing yourself or being accepting of the voice that you have, without you going, I really wish it was more of a baritone, or I really wish I could, do this. I wish I had a voice like Ryan Tedder or something like that. So how did you find that?
Yeah.
And how did you get used to it?
It took a long time. It took a lot of me hating it. A lot of times just me saying like, I can't stand this, the way I sound. Um, because I've got a very nasally voice, very high voice, and eventually I just realized like, it's my voice. There's no changing it. Everyone's like, as you were saying, like, there are singers with unique voices, but I think every voice by its definition is unique.
Yeah.
Every voice has its own weird characteristics and stuff. There's a trend in like, I see it a lot on TikTok, of people all trying to sound like a certain thing, and it's great because it gets them a lot of views, and it builds up an audience, but it doesn't tell me anything about who they are. And I think realizing that if I was going to do stuff that felt vulnerable, I just had to sound like me. And yeah, it's one of those interesting things. It just took a lot of like, literally faking it till you make it. Like I still, I'll listen to it, and I'll listen to some stuff. I'm working on new music right now, and the last couple of vocal takes I've done, I just like listen back and like, I think someone would like this, but it's not me. I need to do this bit again. I like,
So
no,
do you
this
think
isn't
like
sitting
do you
right.
think like
And I'll,
your father went through that, and do you think that's like a common thought that
Oh yeah.
that goes through like a lot of artists.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard him make remarks about how he sounds on early recordings, and I think that's part of what like helped me kind of get over it a little bit, is because I'm like, well, like, I've heard how people talk about my dad's voice. A lot of people love his voice and think it's, oh my god, he's one of the best singers, and I think he's an amazing singer. I do. Like, I'm not trying to say that to disparage him at all. I really like. I think he's an incredible singer. But to hear him say like, "Oh man, when I was, in my early 20s, I can't believe I sounded like that." Like that. Oh, I'm so glad my voice has changed, and
It's the whole self-critical.
I'm so glad I don't sing like that anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've
yeah, and like,
I've always wondered
even
that.
still,
Like,
he.
I meet a lot of people, but it's like I'm not going to ask like Mike Posner. Mike Posner, who is another artist that has a different sounding voice. I'm not going to sit there like doing his like meet and greet. Like, are you used to the sound of your voice? Like, I love finding out what's going on through the heads of musicians and writers and singers. So because those are a lot of things that go through my head that
Yeah,
keep me from doing things like singing. Like, I know I can, I don't, because I don't like the way it sounds, but then I look at like other unique voices, and I'm like, did they get used to it? Like, are how did they get comfortable with it? And I guess it's just through repetition and
yeah,
just being comfortable in yourself. It's a whole self-confidence thing.
yeah. It is a self confidence thing, and not there's the repetition of it. The first couple of times I recorded myself, I was like, oh, I sound awful. And then I was like, I like the song. The song's good. I think my voice can, like, I'll ignore the voice and I'll do something with it later. I'll try to sound better next time. And then like I sit on the song for a week and I go, you know what? I'm actually kind of getting used to my voice now. It kind of sounds good. I can't stand the sound of my speaking voice. I'll I've done a couple of podcasts now, or like I've done some interviews and stuff where I'll listen back to it and go, I sound like that?
It is the hardest
Really?
thing to get used to hearing, is the sound of
Yeah.
your own voice. And
Yep.
so I think right now this is like episode 8. You're in the top 10. And yeah, that's awesome. So you're in the top 10, but it's like getting used to the sound of your own voice got to be the hardest thing I've ever done.
Oh yeah.
It's not one of those things where I'm like, oh, I'm not self-indulgent. Like, I love the sound of my voice and I want to hear it. My voice is more like, I have one. I don't like it much, but it's okay. It's growing on me.
Yeah. It's less like, again, to kind of go with like my skepticism about people. It's the same thing. If people like love the sound of their voice, it's the same thing as people who have never had a self-critical thought.
They are
Um,
clearly narcissists.
yeah, and like I've a lot of people that I know, like most of the singers I know, either family members or friends or um, and, even professional singers, like people that sing opera. Uh, Everyone has like knows the faults in their voice. Um, I've never heard someone say, like, not say, "Oh, I wish I could sing like this," or "I wish I could sing this kind of music," or "I wish I could." I wish I didn't sound like this, or I wish that this register of my voice sounded more full, or like, I was able to sing more sweetly instead of so brash in that section. Um, because like, everyone's listening. They're listening for what's going, like the quality of it and stuff like that. And I just kind of like, I've come to the kind of acceptance with my voice that like, if I'm close enough to the pitch, that's all I'm asking for musically. Well, there's other things too. I want phrasing and I want dynamics, and
Yeah, of course.
but the
That's the
the
composer in you,
tone.
by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm learning this. That's the composer in
yeah,
you that's just like, okay, we need to pick it up here.
yeah. That was the other thing, is like, once I started singing and recording, I was like, oh no, I do know how to sing this well, because I can listen back and go, that that doesn't sound like a complete phrase. The way I did that there, okay, I need to fix this. Which, being on TikTok, you see a lot of people who are amateur musicians who just don't think about that. And that's a learning thing. It's something that, like, if you talked to me 6 years ago about how to sing a phrase, I wouldn't have been able to think about it I put it into words so well. Even then, I didn't really put it into words that well, but like think about it for myself,
It's
and
it's
put
a
it into
whole
action.
evolution. It's like with anything that you do, you just learn from it, and then
Yeah,
like I can tell you, like the first concert I shot, one, I was scared to death, and it was a whole festival. So it was like Neon Trees, and it was 311 and Three Doors Down, and Secondhand Serenade, and Plain White Tees. Horrified. And when I got into photography, I didn't know anything. It was, you said it earlier, you said fake it till you make it, and that, honestly, I need to put that on a shirt because that's what I go by.
yeah.
I
It
It was one of those things where I reached out to a budding radio station. I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Would you be interested in letting me do this? And they're like, yeah, sure, why not? So it was a matter of trial and error, and I can look back at some of the photos that survived the hard drive crash, and look back and go, oh, I can totally see, I was focusing on this, or I could have done this differently, and then I apply that to now, to present.
yeah,
So it's just human to learn, but the the things that bother me is the people that refuse to learn.
yeah,
And there are those people that are like, no, this is how it's done, period. And I know everything there is to do about this because I've been doing this for 25 years, and the refusal to learn.
yeah. I don't understand that lack of curiosity. That's not part of my nature. I think, if you should try to learn something new every single day. It doesn't have to be big. It could just be like, oh, I didn't realize I like the taste of green onions so much.
This is why we click. You just took the words right out of my head. Because
Yeah,
I told both my boys this growing up. It was like, you should try to learn something new every day. It doesn't matter if it's a word or anything, learn something, find something out
yeah,
you didn't know.
yeah. And it
And
doesn't have to be active. It just has to be
yeah,
like you. It's a sign that you are picking up what you are observing things in your world.
yes, absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. It
Like I would, yeah.
when
Today I might. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
when people stop doing that is
Yeah,
when they get upset with themselves.
yeah,
They become very unhappy. I
yeah.
found that out.
That's it's a miserable state to be in. It's, and it's something I hope to avoid. I like learning things. I want to be curious
Well,
for
the
all of
the
my
good news
days.
is that, I mean, you're in a position, everybody's in the same position. You're supposed to behave yourself, wear your mask. Life's gotten
Yeah,
pretty redundant. But the cool thing is that it seems like everything's starting to, the sun's starting to come out a little bit,
yeah,
and you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. You still have to be cautious, of course. um but I think people are going to become excited again, and enjoy music, and a performance. Just it's a matter of getting out. I'm pretty introverted, and so when COVID hit, I was like, I'm okay with this. I can stay inside. I have no problem with this. But after like 4 months, I was like, no, I need to get out of the house. This needs to change. So
yeah,
that's where that curiosity died off for a few months. And basically you just become depressed and upset with the situation that you're in, and then you have to figure out, okay, I have to get out of this because mentally it's unhealthy. So so it's like, well, what am I going to do? So thing number one, it's like I reached out to a couple people on TikTok, and we play Halo every night. We geek out, and we have a conversation. We play just video games at night. That was step number one. And then step number two was, the my buddy at the radio station, he's like, yeah, hey, we've got a festival coming up in August. And I'm like, holy crap, I haven't picked up my camera in like 3 years. So I've got to reacquaint myself with, what I was doing, to become comfortable to do
Yeah.
that again. And then I reflected on my beginning, and to meet icons like your dad, and to meet I met Linkin Park and the Prodigy, and there's a lot of people that I met that I realized that I'm very awkward. It's like I really wanted to have a conversation, but I don't want to have that conversation of, I love your music and so on and so forth. Like I just want to have a conversation like, how was your day? That's the avenue like I wanted to go down. So I was like, how do I break out of my shelf for that? And I'm like, I'm going to put my face on the internet and I'm going to reach out to people and I'm going to talk to them. So this is like step number 2. And then step number 3 is getting out and actually implementing everything and doing better within myself. So
Yeah.
it's not an easy
Yeah.
thing to do, but
No, but that's a great path to be on. And like, kudos to you for acknowledging all that and taking the steps necessary to see it through,
well, I see
at least to the
like
steps so far.
yeah, my youngest son, I see he's got the same, he and I are just the same person. He's just younger. He's a clone, period. So his thoughts and his insecurities are a lot of what just, I swear it just came out of me. It was like a copier a copy machine, and boop, and there's my kid, and he has the same issues. He has a hard time speaking to people, and he has aspirations, and he wants to do this. And I'm like, well, at some point you have to set the example. It's not that difficult. People are just people, period.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
think of a conversation, talk about nerd stuff, talk about going to the next Comic-Con, something, but you got to step out of your comfort zone and really work at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when I was, what was it? I was 15, and I realized adults don't really exist. Adults have other responsibilities that make them adults. But at the end of the day, if anyone could just, if everyone could just, sit at home, play video games, and, hang out with their friends, or, read a book, or like just ignore responsibilities, that's what we'd all be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think everybody they grow up, right? And then they think, well, I'm grown now, and I must worry about my stocks and my Roth IRA, and I have to buy a home and be in debt. And it's like, yeah, but I like to play video games, and I'm going to hang out with my friends, and I'm going to do essentially what I was doing years ago with my friends in Seattle. And it's like, yeah, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just older. I have more bills. That's about it.
That's basically how it goes.
But you miss all the opportunities that you don't take, or the risks that you take. And that's kind of where I'm at. And it sounds like that's kind of where you're at too, because you picked up your guitar and started singing. And I mean, it's you're doing great things. I mean, you're not doing what you necessarily wanted to do, but you're doing
and that will probably come again one day. But
I think you needed to do it.
Yeah.
So
ideally, in a dream scenario, you hand me $100,000 to do whatever I want music wise. I do both. I want to do a project eventually where I do singer-songwriter stuff and classical stuff. One day will happen.
That'd be awesome. I'm trying to think of who all's done that. I think Metallica did S&M back in the day, where they implemented an orchestra, and that was pretty cool. I think that worked out pretty good. But
San Francisco, and then they just did S&M 2 as well.
What? There's a new one?
Yeah, there's a new one. They did that last year.
What? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, same orchestra, but some new arrangements.
Oh, that's awesome.
Some of the classic
Okay.
ones as well.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check that out because I
yeah. My
from them I love the Cthulhu. Uh,
mm,
the way it was done is just like like sometimes you can listen to
yeah,
music and you just kind of just fall into it. And I fall into it
yeah,
every single time I hear that song. So
yeah, yeah.
when you're not doing all this, what are you doing? What do you do in your spare time?
Um, well, music is takes up so much of my spare time because right now I have a full time job outside of this. Working in catering, um, and that eats up like at least 50 hours a week. Um, so music and TikTok are kind of my spare time thing right now. But then outside of that, as you may have seen earlier in our talk, beer. I really like craft beer. I don't mean like beer as in like I'm just always drinking, but like I kind of always am.
Yeah.
I love craft beer, and when it was the not pandemic times, I would spend my weekends going and like trying a new craft brewery. Like especially living in Ohio, I was living in Bowling Green where I did my master's, and I would drive with my partner at the time. We'd go to Toledo or we'd go to Ann Arbor. There were some breweries in Bowling Green, um, Detroit sometimes, and just try a new brewery because there's so much around there.
They're
And same thing in
every time I
Toronto.
go home to Seattle, I stop and see my buddy Tom, and he's like, "Hey, I got this brew. You got to check it out." I'm like, "All
Yeah,
right." He's like, "So it's supposed to be like an oatmeal stout, and it tastes a little like chocolate." And he finds the best beer. But yeah, no, I
it's
love
so
a
good.
good beer too. And then sometimes I'll make my own. Yeah,
Oh, nice. I've never tried homebrewing, but I've always really
it
wanted
is
to.
cost
When
efficient. Like
yeah,
initially
I'm sure.
you have to buy like the ingredients and stuff, but at the end you're like, oh, I don't have to go to the store. Yeah, I'll just take one of these out of the fridge, and I made it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, I want to get into it, and I think now that I have a job, maybe I can actually put down the money to make that initial investment.
it's
Huh.
not that
I think about
expensive.
that.
That there it's maybe a
Yeah,
couple $100, for the buckets and
yeah,
everything that you need. I think to include like the bottles. The bottles are the expensive thing, and then bottle caps are super cheap.
yeah,
Cappers are cheap. So it's just a matter of doing it. It's a lot like anything else. You just got to do it. Make beer.
yep, yeah,
Send
exactly.
me beer.
Yeah.
Send me
Well, only
beer,
if
and
you
I'll
send me
send
some
you
as
beer
well.
in return. Absolutely. It's not coming from
Yeah,
Utah, because Utah has this ridiculous 3.5% alcohol. It's awful. Awful. Nothing but thieves came through. They're like, so what do we have to drink? And I'm like, yeah, you don't want to drink that. Just have hard alcohol. That's it. Don't drink the beer. It's terrible. They're like, what's wrong with the beer? I'm like, it's regulated. They're like, that's weird. I'm like, yeah, a little bit.
it's, welcome to Utah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
welcome to
remember
Utah.
like I remember like learning wasn't weren't the laws like changed almost specifically for the Salt Lake City Games, the Olympic Games?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they were there. There's a whole,
Because it was like a dry state,
if you're
almost
not
basically a dry state before that.
if you're not familiar with Utah, if you mentally you associate Utah with a certain church, and they pretty much run the entire state. So yeah, yeah, it's there's some aspects about Utah that are really weird, and then there's the other side of Utah, the concert side, the venue side, the nightlife, DJs. I mean, there's so much that happens here, and it's not a bad place to be. But
No.
if you like a good beer, it's a little difficult. So it's challenging. You have to go to a separate store. You have to go to a liquor store if you need liquor. It's just little quirky
Well,
things, you know.
that's not too far out there.
No, you're good. I was breathing.
In Ontario, we have we we have the LCBO, which is a government-run liquor distributor and retailer. So if you're looking for anything outside of, well, no, if you're looking for any alcohol, you have to buy it through the LCBO. About 4 years ago, they started putting beer and wine into some grocery stores. The only other places you can buy alcohol is in uh, uh, stores that are owned by the manufacturers themselves. So there's one store that's owned by a couple different wineries, or you're buying beer directly at a brewery.
Well, see, now you have
otherwise
you
have to
have
go
your
to
next
the
project. You open up a winery and a brewery, and you make your own alcohol, which isn't a bad thing. It's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we are at about an hour and a half. And if we keep talking, we'll never have anything else to talk about. It's been so much fun.
Well, I guess we'll just have to come back sometime.
I just opened the door. We got your origin story. I put 2 and 2 together and figured out why you look like Stephen Page. I'm really enjoying your music. It was nice to get like a little bit of insight, you know, like all these voices in my head. Does this happen to other people too? You know, like with your voice and you know, that's kind of like the point of this podcast, you know, like the little fly on the wall. It's to find out, you know, what you're doing, how you get over that. Yes, it goes through my head, and I knew nothing about composers. You know, I always thought it was just strange hand movements. You know, I didn't know anything about it. So today's been an educational day. I learned something, which means I can check that off of my checklist.
Excellent.
But I hope to have you back. I look forward to seeing your journey as far as music goes. Hang out for a second after I stop the recording. But ladies and gentlemen, that's it. This is Isaac Page, Isaac Hunter Page. If you're looking on Tidal or Spotify, that is Isaac Hunter Page. You can also go to Isaac's website, which is isaacpagemusic.com, and you can read all about his bio, who he is. Apparently you have an imaginary bio. You can do that?
Yeah, that's I stole that trick from a composer I really like. He's got there's a composer I like that he's got a whole imaginary bio. Yeah, it's just fun.
You're a time traveling wizard. I love it.
That's what the baton's for.
So could you substitute that for a wand?
I have seen it done before a couple times. There was one more story. I was playing an opera once, and the conductor, it was at my undergrad, and the conductor, as a joke, brought like a Harry Potter wand and like waved it around to the orchestra before the show started, and we all laughed, and then he just put the wand down and picked up his baton, and he conducted the show. And then about 20 minutes before the end of the first act, I think he just like he conducted it with a weird grip, and he was just kind of doing this, and the baton flew out of his hand as he raised his hand above his head, and like the orchestra kept playing, and he took like 2 beats and grabbed the baton and or grabbed the wand and kept going.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it'll work.
That's awesome. He got the job done, and that's what matters, right? Because you said that
exactly
your wand is like it's an amplifier. So I guess it really doesn't matter what it looks like as long as they can see it.
No, exactly.
I learned so much
pretty
today.
Ridiculous ones.
I'm not speaking to anybody. I learned a lot today. I'm talking to my Furby, which I still have one because I'm a massive child.
Nothing wrong with that.
Awesome. All right,
Ah,
ladies and gentlemen, we're
well,
going to wrap this up. Make sure to check out Isaac Hunter page. Give a listen to National Treasure. I really like that song. Also, the lullaby for adults who don't feel like being adults. It makes sense. You just have to listen to it.
yeah,
Until next
yeah.
time,
Well, thank you so much for having me, Justin.
absolutely, man. It was so much fun. Let's see. Let me go through the list of people I've got coming up real quick. Tuesday, May 11th, I have Professor Elemental. Do you know who Professor Elemental is, Isaac? He's a British
No, I
chap
don't.
hop steampunk rap artist. If you haven't,
Nice.
listen to
That's
Professor Elemental. I've been listening to him for a long time now. He's hilarious. I really don't know how to explain it, but give him a listen. Wednesday, May 12th, I've got my buddy, my gaming buddy, Adam Wiley. On Thursday, I've got a friend of Adam Wiley's. His name is Justin Shinkaro. He was also on Picket Fences with Adam Wiley. And on Friday, May 14th, you probably saw him on TikTok. He is it's Props to History. So fantastic. I've got an entire
nice. I
full
love
week.
props to history.
It's so good. It's so much fun. And I don't know where else I would get a chance to speak to all of these interesting people, to include yourself. So thank you again. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow? Do I have something tomorrow? No, tomorrow I get a day off. Thank God. Thank you. I appreciate you, Isaac. Cheers.
Oh, thank you so much. Cheers.